A while back, I decided to finally give game development a proper shot and dove headfirst into an ambitious project without any real previous experience. Turns out, it was far too ambitious. Working on it was a lot of fun. I just didn't really get anywhere as I got bogged down in so many places trying to learn everything at once. I guess I was sort of expecting it to go like this, when in fact, it felt a lot more like that. And even though it sometimes felt like I was making progress, I probably only got this far. Which I guess is me being optimistic. So I scrapped the idea and started to just experiment with Unity in its various systems, which led me to an interesting one called behavior trees, which I thought looked perfect for somebody without coding background like myself. Being able to set up complex actions by simply building flowchart-like behavior trees sounds great, so I decided to build a little learning project around this. To not get lost nearly as often again, I needed a plan. So here's the idea. When starting a new job, it oftentimes starts with an internship, where you pass through a bunch of key departments of a company to get a good overview of how things work. So that's what I set out to do, going from game design to programming, asset and sound design to performance optimization. At least learning the basics for each step. Also, the actual game idea needed to be very simple. Some grid-based space building where you place buildings or platforms in the sea. The current provides you with flotsam, which your workers can pick up and process in various ways. And to make it even simpler, let's not use materials like stone, metal, wood, etc. Instead, just simple cubes and colors as abstract resource indicators. Red for industry, blue for research, and green for food. And with the behavior tree, setting up this initial prototype was easy. Workers pick up what's being washed against the base boundary, bring it to the building and process it. Then they either store it or deliver it to open construction sites. And with more houses, you get more workers. And even more workers. So that's the core idea. Here's the base behavior tree with 3 different actions. For the platforms, I just create a grid where you can place a platform adjacent to an already existing one. And once it's being built, we upgrade the nav mesh so workers can now move on it. Having the core logic down, I jumped into Blender to create the initial buildings for the 3 base colors. Each color consists of a main building and the actual production field, like a farm field. I also implemented a rough version of a research tree to affect worker speed, carry capacity, and production modifiers. And because the water was still until now just a grey box, I added some stylized water. For the shader, I drew heavily from the stylized waterfall setup and changed a few bits and pieces. It's basically some depth coloring with edge highlights for foam and small ripples. Let's just say I spent a lot more time on this than I should have. In general, I lost way too much time on assets, and this was only a single water shader and a few buildings. It was sort of getting out of hand again. So I went back to the buildings and reworked them in a much simpler style. Which was not only going to make future building design easier, but also served another purpose. I was able to implement a more interesting building system, where the cubes are being placed in the correct positions of the construction. With the rough visuals done, it was time for some rudimentary animations to make the production workers do something. So here are the worker actions for the research lab, the farm, and the factory. The last major visual topic left was UI, as until now it's just been Unity's default UI visuals. Time to change that. But honestly, creating decent UI was much harder than I expected. Here's my testing board where I played around for hours to find something I like and what I'm able to create in a somewhat realistic time frame. In the end, this is how it turned out. A building info with buttons and icons for worker assignment and release. Storage menu drop-downs to select the color which you can store. A fully functioning research tree with automated lines between the individual upgrades depending on their prerequisites. Info boxes with description and cost, and a frame that shows how much of the upgrade has been researched. And lastly, a completely over-engineered building menu, which responds to the amount of items and recenters itself no matter what color is open. Here's some footage of the upgrades in action, like increased production speed, multiplier output, or growth speed. And yeah, I almost forgot about one of the most essential parts of the game, the worker. I got so used to the capsule that I nearly missed designing a worker, so let's fix that. Say hello to the new factory, farm and lab colleagues. Another thing I wanted to learn is properly working with third-party asset packs. For my first project attempt, I bought this projectiles pack, which came in handy. I reused a few of the hit effects for each of the production buildings. lightning bolts for the lab, explosions and shatter effects for the factory. In-game, it now looks like this. Combined with the new worker hats and some status icons, it was starting to look somewhat like a game. Green is just two particle systems, and for red I added a concussion effect after a worker slams their head into the flotsam. And I also had to swap the actual worker body. With some transparent materials, it suddenly looked like a blob of jelly, which I decided to embrace by adding some juice with the Feel add-on. I added various feedbacks for walking, pausing, loading and unloading to make it properly wiggle. And here they go, ready for work. Those subtle feedbacks help a lot to give life to the scene. Assigning them to a building now makes them jump into that area and swap their hat and color mid-jump. Honestly, I'm genuinely happy on how this turned out, especially with such a simple character asset. The cracking of the flotsam was easy to set up as well. It's just a pre-cracked model in Blender, which is surprisingly quick to do. The Cell Fracture add-on basically does everything for you, you just need to activate it in the settings. I knew from the start that I wanted some kind of reset mechanic, but I didn't have anything specific in mind. The basic idea was this. Over time the city grows, which leads to research points and with that unlocks upgrades. Every few minutes most of your city gets destroyed by some disaster, and you start from scratch, but you get to keep your upgrades, which makes every new building phase faster and faster. Initially I wanted a massive flood to destroy the base, but that was not going to happen with my current design skill set. So I settled for something different. Every now and then, the sea just turns into a gigantic cooking pot and starts heating up the water until it boils, which then destroys everything but a few reinforced platforms. I don't really want to admit it, but this effect stole about 3 days of my life. But it was a genuinely nice deep dive into shading and VFX. This effect is probably what I'm most happy about in this entire project. Part 1 is a VFX graph that spawns and grows the bubbles, and instantiates small particles and water ripples when they pop. The second part is the actual bubble shader, which is mostly just a Fresnel effect and some rim shading where the bubble touches the water. And to sell the effect, I added some final touches with the Feel feedbacks, like chromatic aberration, camera impulses and vignette. And obviously the obligatory post-processing like bloom and tone mapping. The very last thing I did was to add some sound effects to a few actions, just to tick that off the list of things to learn as well. Sorry for the somewhat random selections of sounds. I think it took me about 4 months to get to this point, and I'm happy with how it turned out. But frankly, I had already lost motivation at that point to continue working on this and make a proper game from this. This might partially come from the project structure that got messier by the day, or the spaghetti code base I had slowly nurtured over the months, but mostly it came down to one thing: the complete lack of prototyping. I've never had somebody playtest the game, or play it myself for that matter. So even though the overall idea could maybe be turned into a playable game, my current implementation was certainly not it. Maybe I get back to it sometime in the future. I realized this a few weeks earlier, but still had a few things I needed to learn and try, so that's what I did, and now I'm happy to put this project on a shelf. The main takeaway for the next project, next to all the technical stuff I learned over the last months, is very simple and probably fairly obvious. Prototyping needs to happen. A lot. With this in mind, I'm going to wrap up the project and look for something new. Multiplayer is looking kinda interesting. Thanks for watching.